Woo! It's happened. I had the great fortune to interview Dr. Ron Paul, of course, former congressman and author of In the Fed. Also, you should check out Liberty Defined by Ron Paul. This is my favorite book of his, by the way. They're both important. He has more than these. This is what I have on hand. We talked about tariffs and some other things, and peace and trade, conflict with North Korea. And I'm going to release some of this interview now. Thank you for joining Substack. So that's who has access to this, or joining A&C Report. You guys have access to this too. This is Dr. Paul. He is an absolute legend. Anyone who follows me knows who he is already. And he really is a trailblazer. He celebrated his 90th birthday. I hope he has 90 more. And so without further ado, here he is, the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Ron Paul.
Dr. Paul, I appreciate you coming on to do this. I have some questions for you regarding tariffs to start with. I know you've probably explained this a million times, but Trump seems to think he thought he could tariff the planet. He rolled that back a little bit, still tariffing China. It brings me back to the nullification crisis in the 1830s with South Carolina, where they were paying the imports. Do you think people realize that tariffs are a tax on the consumer and not the foreign state? And can you explain how that works?
Okay. Excuse me.
It's okay.
No, tariffs are taxes. And the assumption is that when people put it on and they have these wonderful promises that it's going to help the country that puts on the tariffs to gain more income, it never works that way. It injures trade. And so both countries most of the time end up suffering from it. But the fallacy is that if you have a lot of income because people keep shipping things in and they have to pay, is that they can't predict what people will do. Right now, we're witnessing a crash in some of the trade, and that's the reason the stock market's in bad shape. And ultimately, though, the nation that put on the tariff ends up paying more. The customers pay more in order to get their products in. So it becomes a tax. And but they still do it. They've been doing tariffs for a long, long time, always thinking it's going to solve their problems, but it never does. And sometimes it leads to very bad things. Sometimes it leads to trade wars and then real war. And that's why it's a use of force by government to control the economy, and that's not beneficial.
It led to South Carolina attempting secession twice. We see this in the sales tax. It's a buyer's tax. It's so much of a buyer's tax that when you get the receipt, it says the price plus tax. The consumer is actually paying the sales tax. I think tariffs are similar. It's a tax on foreign products by the consumer. The argument, though, is that, well, it's protectionism. It's to help American manufacturing so that you're forced to buy domestically because they make it too expensive to buy things from abroad. But what are some better ways to bring back manufacturing, maybe lowering the cost of living, other methods, rather than putting tariffs on to protect industries?
Well, they have to... They have to have certain rules they want to favor. And the one is that recognizing that the consumer has really the clout. in a free market. The freer the market, the more powerful the consumer is, because the consumer can decide which businesses succeed, which ones fail, which ones makes more profit, and the consumer benefits by the best price. But it's hard to find these situations where they're totally free to work that way. So what they do is they're always looking for an advantage one way or the other, and they go to the government for it, and they think, well, we can raise money this way, or we can cancel out the competition. And I think today it's harder than ever. They should recognize it. So far, I think an early report was that, the administration wanted to protect the car industry. Well, the car industry was going down, and there was a town in Michigan that was having a great deal of problem. Turned out that about 15 or 20 countries sent products and parts to Detroit to fix the cars. So it had nothing to do with the manufacturers, but only a part of that. But they do these things, and it's usually a political stunt to show that they're doing something about it. But what they should do is look at a system where when anybody wants to tax or do anything of intervention, they should say, what is it going to do to the consumer? The consumer should have, no wage and price controls, because that interferes with the cost. And all trade should be, voluntary. And a couple basic principles like that would eliminate the fact that tariffs are forced, that they force taxes and they pretend they're going to do something, and they hurt other people. It requires, more price inflation. What they do is they see prices going up, and they just call it inflation. Oh, what we do for that is we raise interest rates, all this silly stuff. But we have to have a greater recognition of the importance of the consumer and the voluntarism, to let every transaction be voluntary, except those maybe under condition of declared war. But otherwise, you should be able to let your goods and services cross borders. The best example I can give is nobody even keeps track of, balance of payments and balance of trade, say between New York and between New York and Texas. There's probably an imbalance between all the states. None of them are perfectly balanced, because the money circulates and it finds its way back. So, but people think that, well, we have to take care of no imbalance. But the imbalance there is telling the consumer and the businessman what they have to do. If they're not selling their product, you don't want protection. What you want to do is find out why they aren't selling the product, and there should be nothing to protect us, a particular industry over another.
Sometimes it's a simple explanation, like population size. Of course, South Korea is going to sell more goods to the U.S. than the U.S. is going to sell to South Korea, because South Korea has 51 million people, and the United States has 330 million people. So there's more customers. There's more people who can buy the car. And so there's supposed to be a natural imbalance when you're talking about different sizes, and there's many other variables that they ignored in their little fuzzy math that they did to implement which tariffs they were going to do. But that's the administration we have. On the other side, more extreme than tariffs, what's detrimental to trade, is sanctions. And so over here, I'm in South Korea right now with our neighbors in the north who are facing severe sanctions. They don't have the best leadership, but there is no military solution to the Korean conflict. What might be better steps economically to soften things and make normal relations between the Koreas?
Well, I think yes, it's artificially designed. The power brokers got involved and got in a war and killed a lot of people, and I compare that to this mandate, the United Nations. That was the first thing the United Nations got involved in, was getting involved in Korea, and it also set a bad precedent, because there were a few, like Robert Taft would say, you can't go to war. You haven't even made a declaration of war. And Truman said, oh, we're not having a war. This is just a police action. So he did. So that the people are supposed to believe that stuff. And that's that's the biggest problem that they have. They lie us into war, and the whole thing is the people get punished from this. There's always a special interest trying to get an advantage of doing this. But I compare what happened in Korea. And I know there was a fight going on over there. That was one place I went in and out a couple of times when I was in the Air Force, but just TDY, never stationed there. And I keep thinking, I went up to the zone between North and South, and it was interesting to see this. And I thought it's so unnecessary, but because the Soviets and our side were negotiating, well, we'll fight it out. And there's no winner. Okay, we'll divide it up. And we ended up with two different countries. And of course, the ones that had the better policies did better, but they're still, not a unity. And so it's still messy. And I keep thinking, well, it got messier when we went into Vietnam. The French were in there for a long time telling them how to live. And then the French walked out. They should have never walked in. So just like Afghanistan, the Russians leaving, we walk in and get ourselves into a mess. So we walk in there, and for a lot of years, and I was in the service in the 60s, and it was just a total disaster on what happened. And I tell people that, we lost the war in Vietnam. We had to march out. We lost, and we had to admit it. And guess what happened? We had better relations with them. The Vietnamese became more market-oriented, and before you knew it, within a few years, we were trading with them and investing in the country. And just think, the unity of Korea has never occurred because it was divided artificially. Maybe if the Russians and the United States had stayed out of there, maybe the Koreans, I don't know. But I think they should have decided it. There shouldn't have been so much other interference from the outside.
The reason I ask is today it seems to be, when they're threatening Iran and these neocons are saying they want to give them the Libya model, there seems to be two models: the Libya model where you disarm and get invaded, or the North Korea model where you arm up and you have to live under that, but they're not getting invaded because it's impossible. There would be too much destruction. And so I'm wondering what ways we could ease tensions without war. Maybe cooperative economic zones that they tried in the 90s, peace and trade, something it might take a long time, but a way to resolve this conflict without doing war games back and forth.
Well, I don't think you can have peace unless both sides have some type of a gentleman's agreement that you can't use force of arms to have your way. And people should work things out. It's the principles that the founders gave us, even though they weren't perfect and they slowly disintegrated. But to let people do, they treat. I think the example of how the states have been treated is sort of a good example of how countries could have worked. And it still works now because the administration now is talking about, not what they should be talking about is get the government out of education and medicine for that matter, but to get them out of education. They said, well, let's just take the Department of Education and give all the responsibility back to the states. That's how they should do that, but they should eliminate all the funding too and let every state take care of it. But and so the issue of states' rights come up, and some people defend some of these positions of going back to that because they can see some advantages of it. So we do have that, and one thing is we don't measure, the trade balance and the balance of payments between the states. Everything happens automatically, voluntarily, and there's a few things that have actually come about in a voluntary manner. You say, well, didn't you have to have a federal law to make sure everybody, when the automobiles came out, they were very, very noisy. So don't we have to have a national law to ban ban that noise, and everybody has to have a muffler. That's not the way it happened. Local communities said you can't come into it. It was a local rule that you can't disturb the peace, and you have to quiet your cars down. And every state had their separate laws, and but what they permitted was, licensing became something that they worked out. Our license can go one state to another, and we sort of like it and take it for granted. But that voluntarism and cooperation is what comes about when the people are left with the responsibility of working it out peacefully. It's the notion by some individuals, and they're usually in minority by numbers, that who are the authoritarians who want to run the show, get the richest, and have the most power, and have power over war and trade and everything else. That's the disease. We can't solve these problems unless we recognize that it's really a principle of people understanding liberty. And fortunately for us, there was a good start for us in this country, that there was an understanding of what it is like. Of course, we have used up that liberty, and we're fighting now by a few people to return to that principle of understanding that individuals being allowed to deal with these problems themselves and their neighbors is a much better way to go.
Trade business to business. That's the way to go. Thank you so much, Dr. Paul. I'd love to talk to you longer, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you've got a lot of things to do.
So. Good. Okay.
I appreciate it. I'll be watching the Liberty Report. Hopefully we won't be at war with Iran.
Okay. Nice to be with you today.
Thank you. I've met you a couple of times. I flew into Texas and met you a few times.
Good. Wonderful. Yeah. Stay involved. Your message is important. That's the only way we can do it. When you're alone, you can do it if you have a couple of people listening, but people that look ways for spreading the message, I think, is the most important thing we could do.
What a legend. And he was right about everything he said. I really liked his example about Vietnam, what happened after we left. Things can be improved through simple dialogue, peace, and trade. Now, I took the shades off for that. It was only 15 minutes. It was starting to bother my eyes. I didn't tell him that I have macular degeneration. I just couldn't. It's a once in a lifetime thing, and I'm not going to dress up and wear the shades. I just, it's like Tim Pool going to a wedding with his beanie on. I thought it'll be fine. But I do have my second eye surgery tomorrow, so I will be out of it other than doing voice podcasts for a while. Don't know how long, but hopefully that'll go well, and we'll start to see improvement visually in the eye that's damaged. And we are working on Empire Mass every day. I've done narration research. It's going slower because of this, but that's going to be the first half is going to be completed soon, and I'm going to take that around shopping. If you want to donate, it's givesingo.com/911, givesingo.com/911. And if some freak that stabbed a teenager to death can raise $500,000, then I think we could raise in the tens of thousands for a movie that explains the neocons' role in September 11th, as well as the pointless war in Iraq. So that one's coming. We're working on it every day. Wish me luck for tomorrow. Should be fine. And we'll catch you over on Substack or Rumble or ANC Report soon. Hey, if you're not in Telegram, consider joining. We do Walk and Talk podcast on there, and it looks like I'll be doing that for the rest of the next week or two, because I'm going to just avoid screens completely. And yeah, I'm like Johnny Roselli with the shades. Avoiding sunlight and screens is best for the healing process. So it makes work very hard, but that's where we're at there. Dr. Paul's the best. Please add him on Twitter if you haven't already. You'll regret it. We don't know how many years he has left. I know that's a morbid thing to say, but get in there, watch the Liberty Report. Add him, add Daniel McAdams as well. And if you haven't read his books, go out and get them. We have them in our library. Peace.